Come join me as we paint this vibrant 3D pumpkin. I'll show you how we create layers to create the 3D effect. Let's get started. I have here my reference photo that I drew my pumpkin from, but I'm really not going to look at that through this tutorial because I kind of want to do my own thing. Here is my line drawing that you can download for free. The link is in the description. These are the brushes I'm using. These are my older brushes. All the numbers are worn off on them. I couldn't even tell you what brand they are, but I really enjoy these older brushes. I haven't used them in a long time and they just feel so good. They're broken in, they're soft, and they'll just kind of give me a softer look with my painting today. Now I'm just wetting down my pumpkin. Our first layers are going to be wet on wet. I'm using my Azo Yellow Medium. It's a nice, vibrant, warm yellow. And that's just going to be my base layer. Every layer of color we put on here will just kind of pop through. This is just a really good color to start with. It'll help give us some of our highlights and some of our dimension. This is the orange that I'm using. It's a cadmium yellow orange. This is actually the only orange I own. Not sure why it's the only one I have, but I've gotten very comfortable with this color, and the times I've gone into the art store to pick out new colors, I sometimes get kind of overwhelmed because there's such a huge selection, and I just kind of walk away thinking, I like this color, I can make many different oranges from it, so I've just kind of stuck with this one. Just kind of letting that melt into my yellow, just letting a little bit of that yellow peek through. I'm realizing now that I definitely drew my pencil lines a little too dark. They're not blending in very well. I kind of drew them a little darker for the tutorial so that you could see where my lines were, but if you're doing this, I'd kind of draw your lines a little bit lighter than that, but that's okay. We're just practicing, we're having fun here. It's okay if we see the pencil lines. Now I'm going to use a little of my permanent red deep. We're going to let that just kind of mix in with our yellow and our orange. It looks pretty intense right now. It looks very red, but as it kind of melts in there, it'll kind of become a deeper, nice warm orange color. If all I used were just like a light orange and a dark orange, this pumpkin wouldn't have very much dimension to it. So using these different colors is really going to help give this pumpkin character and dimension. Now I'm just dropping in a little bit of my orange, just kind of continuing to build that vibrancy, letting the orange melt into the red, just like we let the red melt into the orange. I could have mixed the colors on the palette and just kind of put it on there, but it would turn out pretty flat and then we'd be a little disappointed in the end. Now we're going to do a fun little technique. I have a embossing tool here or the end of a paintbrush. I'm going to show you both. Just taking my paper embossing tool and I'm just kind of pushing into the paper and I'm making a little bit of a groove. I'm not pressing too hard. And the darker color just kind of sinks into where I'm pressing, and you kind of get that 3D kind of where the seams are of the pumpkin or the ridges of the pumpkin. Just a really fun, natural way to get in that detail. And if you don't have an embossing tool, I kind of have the end of one of my smallest brushes. It's a little bit wider and I'm not very comfortable with this. I'm not really enjoying this, but it's turning out pretty good actually. But I kind of prefer the embossing tool. But it just shows you can use what you already have, that you don't have to go buy any special tools. And now I'm just taking a little bit of tissue I'm just kind of tapping out where I want that highlight to be. The light is coming from the left side there, so I'm just kind of tapping out some highlight. I'm kind of tapping out in a few of the other little areas to kind of create a look of some texture. My pumpkin is still wet, and I'm just adding in a little more of that red. Now that the color is kind of seeped into the paper, I'm just wanting to build that vibrancy a little bit more while it's still wet. I'm not going very dark, I'm just kind of adding another little color wash on top of what I already have. If your paper is already too dry, then you could just put this layer on very watery, or you could kind of wet your pumpkin a little bit and then add the extra color. Now I'm just going to tap in a little more of my yellow. And a lot of times in watercolor, you don't want to create these blooms, but I'm actually going for that effect. So adding in this yellow and just kind of watching it spread and kind of create some texture by having those blooms, I kind of enjoy that look. While we're waiting for our pumpkin to dry, we're going to just start working on the stem. I'm just going to be working on the base layer. I've got my raw sienna. Just kind of want to put it on lightly. We're going to be doing some green over the top of this, but we're just kind of getting that base color down. We're going to be creating the twists and the turns of the stem. And I had a little bit of burnt sienna on my palette, so I'm just dropping it in a few little places. It'll just kind of help build that texture and variation. While it's still a little bit wet, I am just going in with a little mixture of sap green and olive green. Just kind of starting out in the areas where I've already kind of drawn the lines, where it kind of shows that twist of the stem. And we'll just kind of continue to build on that look as we go. I'm looking at my reference photo a little bit to kind of see where the shadows are and where my lines are. Our pumpkin is completely dry here, so I'm just bringing in some water. I don't want to disrupt what I have going on underneath there, so I'm just putting it on there really lightly. But we're going to be doing another color wash, and I just want it to blend in there really softly over the top. So we'll be adding in our orange and more of our red and a little more yellow. But building the second layer is really building that dimension of the pumpkin. But we want all our lines to be really soft. We don't want any harsh lines. So that's why we're just doing the water first and then dropping in our color. Now you're probably wondering why I put all that color on and now I'm tapping it out. It actually leaves a little of that color behind, but I'm just adding texture and interest into the pumpkin. Rarely do we see a pumpkin that's absolutely perfect, so I'm just kind of building that texture by tapping out a little bit of that color. Now we're going to work on our stem a little bit more. I'm kind of making a darker green here so I can kind of add in some of my shadow, just kind of create the lines and the twist on that stem. That green is bleeding in a little bit into my orange because my pumpkin is still a little bit wet, but that's okay. I actually kind of like that. I was hoping for it to do that, and it helps build a little more interest at the top of the pumpkin. I decided here I needed a little more color at the top of the pumpkin, kind of create that curve that you see. It'll make the highlight in the middle of the pumpkin kind of pop out a little bit more. I'm just taking a liner brush, and I once again wanted to add a little more detail into the stem. Just kind of deepening the shadow and the detail. Sometimes when we start a painting, we don't know how many layers we're going to put on until the very end, because we paint, we let it dry, we sit back, we see what we need to do more of, and I just felt like I needed to add a little bit more onto the stem. Now we're going to add in our shadow underneath. Just adding in my water so my shadow will go on softly. I'm using my Daniel Smith Moonglow. If you've seen any of my other tutorials, it's my favorite color for shadows. And if you don't own this color, then you could use indigo, like a darker blue, mix a blue with a purple. I don't care for Payne's Gray. A lot of people do like Payne's Gray, and if that's what you have and you're comfortable using, then you pick the shadow that you want. But I prefer this color. Now I want to add some of that shadow to the base of the pumpkin. This is extremely watery. I want it to be very soft. I don't want it to ruin that orange that we've already created. But the shadow and the pumpkin kind of need to meet a little bit. You don't want to make that shadow and then the pumpkin just looks like it's floating above. So we're just adding in a little bit of that shadow. Extremely lightly. I'm adding just a little bit at the top. Got a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to kind of tap out a little bit there. Just want a little hint of shadow there. Just kind of fine tuning the last of what I feel I need to do here. I'm going to add a little bit of that orange into my stem. because we want our stem to look like it's a part of our pumpkin. Just adding just a little bit here and there just to bring that in. It really does tie things together. And our very last thing, I'm just making a very yellowy green, very faint. I'm just adding a little bit of that green into the pumpkin for the same reason we put the orange into the stem. And there you have it, your vibrant 3D pumpkin. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that I'll see you on the next one. Happy painting!